that means? That means normally I'll run over there and hit the gong, but where's my mallet? Jocelyn stole it from me. Hit it! All right. That means better sign quick. Better sign quick, or you're not. You're number 21. All right. On time drawing. Though Sonny was a little late, we'll include it. All right, so we have 21, and the number is, what is it? 2. Darshana, what did she win? She won fantastic mug, a mouse pad, a shirt, and a great bag. All right, we have a lot of ground to cover here, so let me turn off the music. All right. We're going to watch it. Maybe we're going to watch a video. Here we go.
So many. Just as the Israelites wandered through the valley in search of bountiful pasture.
Hey, man. Nah,
It's real.
That's just a reminder. Turn your phones. I almost said that your something phones. Turn your phones on silent as to not interrupt our speakers. So everybody throughout the meeting, go ahead and take pictures of all your speakers, and at the end, check in on Facebook. All right? Make sure you. I don't see you. There we go. There's one. How about this? All right. There's my broker information for when you're writing contracts, and hopefully we're all writing a lot of contracts. The rev up coming up. So we're coming up to Module 8, Financing the Sale of Mortgage Basics, and that is tomorrow morning at 9. Then Monday evening at 4 is the sales cycle and effective client communication. And then next Wednesday is the residential listing agreement. I'll be teaching that one. And then next Friday, week from tomorrow, is finding motivated sellers and preparing to win the listing. We're changing, the office is closed this weekend for, I don't know what they're doing, but they're doing something that we can't be in the office this weekend. If you need to use an office, use one of the others, Green Valley, Summerlin, or Northwest.
Or go to Mark's house.
Or go to Mark's house. You know, I live way far away, so nobody's going to want to drive out that far.
There's a showing by your house anyway.
What's that?
The showing is close to your house.
There's great builders out there. There's a lot of new homes out there. We're changing up our rev up schedule a little bit. Even though it says 12, there's really only 10 of them here. We got rid of a couple. And as opposed to our Wednesday rev ups being at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, so Friday and Wednesday are going to be at 9 a.m. and we're not going to do any more Monday evening classes. So this is it. So any questions on that, just let me know. They're going to be live. This round starting on March 1st is going to be live in this office and via Zoom. And we're still going to go back and forth. We'll do these 10 here in this office, next 10 at the Summerlin office. If you want your commissions held, there's the flyers for it. The question came up was, well, I have Zelle, so why didn't I get my commission? Well, it's more than just having Zelle or having Zelle on with your lender or your bank, I should say. You have to register it or enroll in it, and this is how you do it. So there's flyers out there, you just scan it, yeah.
And there's something I learned, if your file's incomplete, you no longer are eligible for Zelle.
For that transaction.
That was per
Yeah,
Michael.
for that
For that
transaction.
transaction.
So your file has to be 100% complete in order to get, it's the same as paper check. Your file has to be 100% complete in order to get a paper check, same as Zelle. So what happens is, if your file is not complete, you're not gonna get Zelle, you're gonna get a paper check. Team Spirit Friday, every Friday, wear your favorite sports team's jersey. If you want, so every Friday, Stephanie puts together an email that has the open houses of the week and the new listings. If you want to be included, have your listings included on these emails, that Stephanie has to have them before Thursday at noon. So if you want to be included in tomorrow's, have it Thursday by noon.
So I have a client that did not opt into all the syndicated. He
Okay.
wants it strictly on the MLS. Because of those restrictions, are we allowed to give Stephanie it, or should we, are on the side of caution and not give it to her?
So the question was, she has a seller that opted out of all the online advertising and everything, and wants to know if they can be included on this. I would ask my client, we send these emails out to our company every Friday, do you want to be included?
There's no risk of it going
No.
outside of the realm that he's
No,
supposed to be
it's
in?
just via email to just our agents.
Okay,
So your client doesn't wanna be on social media or anything?
no,
So are you supposed to like advertise just like sign and
It's
that's
just
it?
MLS, it's in the MLS, and it meets someone's requirement.
So when you input a listing, you check on whether your seller wants it to go to all the.
So you only able to advertise through the MLS and whatever signage you're out for that open?
I have no sign, and this is just something we had to be cautious about. He has a batshit crazy ex, and he didn't want her to know that the house was being for sale, so.
I can so relate.
You can?
So, excuse my language, but
Times 3.
that's what he told me, so you have to take precautions on where it will be advertised. So this way, only agents.
Yeah, Alicia has something to add to this.
So that is true, there is the internet
Thank you.
yes, no box that you're marking on your listings.
Say that again?
The internet, yes, no box, I think it still says internet, yes, no.
Yeah.
I had
If
to
you're
mark
marking it no, that is true, we can't pull list reports, marketing kits
Yep.
for you.
Yep.
Like,
Okay.
it won't even show up anywhere, so I
So
just
I was
wanted you-
wondering why I didn't get one.
Yeah, that's
why.
why, that's why,
Okay.
yeah, Jocelyn sends everybody's marketing kit every morning, so if you guys are marking it no, you won't get it, so.
Okay, well, that's good to know too.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mark, for
Awesome.
clarifying.
cause we won't know you
All
have a
right.
listing.
So every week on our weekly newsletter that goes out every Friday, you all know and you all read your weekly newsletter, right? If you read anything from us, read that weekly newsletter. But we started doing Pet of the Week. And so this if you want your pet to be, I wouldn't say included, but considered for Pet of the Week, because we do get quite a few pets, from snakes to cats to... So this week's Pet of the Week is Gigi.
That's
What?
Coco.
Oh, this is not Gigi.
That's not Gigi, but.
Oh, this is Coco. One guess whose dog this is.
I don't know. Oh my gosh, she's so.
All right, so many of you know, many of you don't know that I read a lot, but I don't read. I shouldn't say I read a lot because I don't read any. I listen. I do Audible, and that's one thing that I love, the fact that I live 20 minutes from here now, because that's my my reading time, I listen to Audible. And so every once in a while, I'm going to give you some of my book recommendations. And this is so this Can't Hurt Me came out about 3 or 4 years ago, and I listened to it back then. It was amazing. And then he just released his new book. This is David Goggins. Now it's called Never Finish. So what I did is I decided, you know what, I'm going to read or listen to Can't Hurt Me. So I just got done listening to Can't Hurt Me and Never Finish. And the cool thing about this is it's way better as an Audible than it is as a book, because it's kind of like an Audible book, and then they stop in the middle, like in the middle of a paragraph, they'll stop and he'll be having a conversation with his ghostwriter, and they'll just talk. So there's a lot of great stories that they talk about that aren't in the book. I mean, it's a long read or listen. Each one is like 9
How do you
hours.
access it?
Huh?
How do you access it?
Through Audible. Yeah.
You have to have an Audible app.
You can also do it through books on your Apple. Apple has automatically books, and you can download it from there too.
So highly recommend it. Has anybody read or listened to? Yeah. It's awesome.
amazing.
Did you do both or just?
I just did the Can't Hurt Me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And a little bit, just a brief, David Goggins came up from a really rough childhood, like beatings on a regular basis, and then he became a Navy SEAL. And everything that he went through to become a Navy SEAL, and everything that he's gone through since, it's just, he's now he's a long distance runner and cyclist, and he does all sorts of great stuff, but amazing stories. So that's my book recommendation for the month. Charity, is Charity here? Yeah. There you are. Everybody, welcome Charity Bond.
I'm going to make it quick. So a lot of you heard the Fed raise the rates yesterday. That did not actually affect mortgage rates. We actually went down yesterday. So good news.
I heard yesterday was the lowest in 5 months.
Yeah.
What is
So
that?
the Fed, we're right about low sixes.
Oh, good.
So I think the national rate is 6.04 today. So yeah, so that did not translate. So the Treasury is where it needs to be. The Fed is like a year ago. Like they don't know what they're doing.
I wonder why.
And I'm an old person, but I can say that. But they need to get out of their jobs, and we need some new blood in there. But so nothing really happening in mortgage changes or anything. Everything pretty much stayed the same. I've gone over our new products last week. Just a reminder, we do have a 21-day closing. We are honestly just about 2 weeks. I mean, everything is moving very quickly. A lot of business in the market. So if you guys need a 21-day close, if we don't close, so if you have a seller and you need to present it and they are pre-approved, we will pay up to $2,000 if we don't close on time. So that does kind of get all the parties. Now, we're not responsible for escrow or if the client doesn't want to provide anything, but overall, we will pay $2,000 if we don't close.
That's FHA?
Yeah. Okay. Just an on-time closing, yeah. It's just something that we say, honestly, FHA loans are ready just as quick as conventionals right now.
Yep.
Appraisals are coming back within a couple days, and again, they're gonna be pre-approved, so realistically, we need a contract, an appraisal, and escrow disclosures and HOA stuff, so it's usually a quick closing. Lately, I have been sitting, like, I have one that's supposed to close on the 17th, I already have docs at title, and I'm like waiting, trying to get that seller to shop faster. So, that's all it does.
Just a quick question. Yesterday I heard about a program called 321 loan or something.
321 BIDO, yeah, that's been around for a while. So you will need seller participation, and essentially what it is so let's say the interest rate is 6% today. The seller and the buyer will both have to pay to purchase that buy down. The first year they'll have 12 months at a 3% rate, then they'll have 12 months at a 4% rate, and then 12 months at a 5% rate, and then it'll be fixed at 6% for the remainder of the loan. It is very costly, so you will have to have like a full 3% from the seller, and the buyer will probably have to pay it. Essentially what the lender is doing is they may be giving your buyer 12 months at a 3% interest rate, but we're still getting that interest paid through upfront by the seller, it goes into an escrow account and subsidize their payments for that 36 months. So, but yeah, that's been, and we do have a 2-1 buy down, it's a little bit cheaper.
And the final rate is determined when the current rate, when you go into that, agreement?
Yeah, so we lock it, when we lock it, then that 3-2-1 obviously takes effect just from there. So there's no, you don't pay extra in terms of the interest rate. They're just locking at whatever the market rate is that day.
Okay.
And then that interest is how it's calculated. So it's not, people will ask like, is it a 2% discount or whatever? That's not the case. It's literally the interest that they are saving over 36 months kind of gets put into that escrow account, and then every month that escrow feeds that payment. So the lender never takes less than 6%.
If somebody wanted to refinance after doing that within a year and a half, because interest rates are.
They, all that money sits in escrow would be applied to their payoff, they don't lose any pennies.
There's no
Yeah.
prepayment penalty or anything?
No prepayment penalty, and so it just gets applied to their payoff, so they don't lose it, if they want to do that. Okay?
Alrighty.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Oh, one more question.
Can you explain that 100% down payment assistance, FHA?
So it's really just a grant, it's just the, down payment assistance, we don't have, I keep hearing people say 100%, there is no 100% financing, it's just what they'll do is they get, for us, we use Home as Possible, so they'll get all of their down payment covered through the Home as Possible, there's usually a little bit left over to apply towards the fees that they charge, and that's it, there's no 100%, and, cause I've been like knee deep in FHA lately trying to find the reduction in premiums that are supposed to be coming across. So I think people just mislead at 100%, but it's actually like a silent second through down payment assistance. So.
Cool. Awesome, Jerry, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna hold off on Rock for just a minute. You guys wanna talk about this later as well? Let's wait on that. Let's talk about, so stats by Emily, not with Emily, unfortunately. So Emily still does these stats for us every week. Look at the new listings, active listings are coming down at our peak. We're like 10,000 listings. Just 2 weeks ago, we're at 76, and now we're at 72. So now is talk to your sellers that are on the fence, thinking about selling, let them know listings are down, so it's a good time to list your property. Even though that the month's inventory is creeping up, that just means that we're more in a buyer's market. However, I'm hearing out there that we're having more multiple offers. Anybody running into multiple offers or no? A little bit, Judy, you?
Even in the higher price point.
Yeah.
We just had one on a $1.6 million.
Multiple offers on 1.6. That really sucks that you have a $1.6 million. Yeah, so I'm hearing multiple offers, even though our month's inventory seems to be creeping up, because just 2 weeks ago was 4.5 months. So again, we provide these for you every week. We put it in the newsletter. It goes into our social media. Grab it, share it in yours. We educate you so that you go out and educate your buyers and sellers. All right, so let's welcome Rock Title up. Come on up, Rock.
Oh, Jocelyn's control now.
You want to talk about that?
Okay,
let's
talk about this, so you go.
Hi guys. So next week we're having a vision board day. It's gonna be at 10 a.m. after the orientation. So Tony's actually working on this with me. She's providing the supplies, so we would love for you guys to RSVP to Stephanie so she knows how many supplies to get. We are gonna be doing mimosas, so there'll be vision boards and all that cool stuff. You guys
When
wanna
is
come?
that again?
Who's not done a vision board before? They're so
Who
fun.
currently has a vision board hanging in their office or room or something? Yeah. They're great. They really are. For years, You know, I didn't have a vision board, but I had a picture of the car I wanted. And I finally got the Porsche 911 a few years ago. So now I don't have it, but it'll be back on my vision board, a different one. So the mind is a powerful tool, and when you're looking at something that you want all the time, you're more likely to get it. So vision boards are awesome.
Yeah, it'll be next Wednesday at 10 a.m.
Yep. And mimosas.
Mimosas, yes.
Okay, really quick, yeah. Two things, hopefully everybody got the flyer for our rock title net sheets have changed the look and the platform. So we are now Prism, super easy to use, very fast and free, of course. Brand with me.
How much? How much?
Is there an set a price here soon? Rocknetsheets.com right here at this website. Create your free account today. But for those of you who still love to come directly to us to do your net sheets, we will gladly do them all day long. I whip them out in less than 30 seconds. So,
Is there a phone app for that?
No, it's web-based. Great question. Anything can be added to your home screen, and it looks like an icon that you've downloaded from the App Store or Android. So just same thing with your, laptops. Add to your home screen a shortcut. If you guys do that, I have tons of shortcuts on my desktop. But they're great. They're branded to you when you go into your profile and add all your info. I think that's it. Deb, do you guys have any questions? Title and escrow related? Deb's here. Everybody knows Deb Fernandez.
Good morning. I just wanted to mention again, I'll be stationed in the office a couple of days a week, so when you see me, if you have any questions, please feel free to stop by or just stop by and introduce yourself. I've only been with the company for 5 months, so I don't really know everybody, so it would be nice to meet you all on a one-on-one, so thank you.
And the great thing too today, because we're super excited, and that's what we're gonna talk about now, is our introduction of Sara Remley. We are super excited. Sara is our partner for 1031 accommodations. So when you guys have a 1031 exchange file, come on up, Sara, I'm gonna go ahead and have you get started. So when you guys open your next escrow with us, and it's 1031 related, or even prior to, which she will cover today, you can get the steps started with your investor or yourself on the 1031s. This is who we resource, and phenomenal. I mean, this presentation is so great, so thanks for being here today. You are gonna get some great info out of this, and we hope to see all your 1031s come our way. So Deb and her will be teaming up with that as well. So thanks, you guys. Any questions for me? No? Yes.
Do you have CE classes coming up for us?
Oh, funny that she
Yes,
asked
we
that.
do.
So her and I are getting together. Great question. We're getting together after the sales meeting today, and we're gonna set the dates. So yes, we're gonna start doing CE classes at the Rock Title Southwest Office Training Room. Who's been there? Have you guys seen our training room over there? It's nice. It's nice and comfortable. It's underutilized. We're just down the street, and we're gonna be excited to put those classes
So you're
together.
gonna put CE together?
Yes.
Excellent.
She has 2 CE classes that we're gonna open up, right? 2, right?
Yep, we have 2. We have an essentials, which is the basics, and then we have an intermediate, which kind of covers those advanced concepts.
And what does it fall under?
General, both fall under general. They're both 3-hour, 3-credit courses.
Yeah, I'm excited. Okay, cool. Thanks, you guys.
Awesome. Thanks, Felicia. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Hi. Thank you so much for being here. What a great turnout. So my name is Sara Remley. I'm with Investment Property Exchange Services. That's a lot. It's IPX 1031 is the short name for my company. I'm a former realtor. I've been in your shoes. I've been licensed in several states, so I know how valuable your time is. And I do appreciate you being here. So my goal today, we're going to talk about 1031 exchanges. To me, it's really important that we have the conversation. So don't hesitate with the questions. We're going to talk about context of how this applies to real life and the deals that you've either worked on or will be working on. And so it's not about turning you into a tax nerd today. That's me. I'm on the dark side now. I've gone from real estate to taxation. And really, I try to keep the presentation really not too technical, right? We're talking about IRS code. Some parts of it are a little technical, but we're going to talk about generally how to apply these concepts with your clients, right? Has anybody in here had 1031 exchange sales or transactions? A couple? Okay, awesome. I hope they went smoothly for you. Yeah, I would say they're very easy transactions. Everyone gets a little intimidated when they hear 1031, right? Because we're talking about tax code and guiding your clients through tax code, and that's our job. You know what a broker say, be the source of the source, right? Don't feel that you have to take it all on. So I hope they went smoothly. So I'm gonna start with some basics. This is actually the most important slide of the day. It's my contact information. So, and the reason I say that is that the market that you work in right now is 25 to 30% investor driven. So if you're an agent that hasn't had a transaction with an investor, there's an inevitability that you absolutely will, right? You might not remember my name in a few months. Hopefully you'll remember the name of the company. So I'm not offended if you put me in your phone as 1031 Sara. You will need this resource. I know, it's one of those things, I'm not offended, but when you need a 1031 and when you have a client sitting there and you don't wanna be the deer in the headlights agent, like, oh my goodness, do you have a resource? 1031, it's easy to find that individual, which will hopefully be me. So, my cell phone is here. I actually answer my cell phone. I also get some interesting text messages about 1031 exchanges late at night. So I was like, put down the wine, we'll talk tomorrow. Sometimes people learn just enough about the code to be dangerous to themselves, right? So what I'm gonna do today, we're gonna talk about some basics. We're gonna talk about some basic requirements, why people do exchanges, and then I'm gonna go into some of the advanced concepts. When I talk about advanced concepts, these are strategies that your clients can use, converting the use of a property. Maybe they want to move out of a primary and convert it into an investment. And we're going to talk about how they can take advantage of a couple of tax strategies. Okay. Has anybody heard of a reverse 1031?
I've heard of it.
Only the tax nerd? Okay, yes, I love it. And you've heard of it? Did you do a transaction with one? No. And it's a fantastic tool. We're actually doing record numbers of reverses. It allows your client to buy that target property up front, right? So they're not selling first and having those deadlines kind of looming. So we'll talk about those.
That's better.
What was that?
That's much better.
It's much better. It's much better. Yeah, it's a wonderful tool. Yeah, I really try to get the word out on those. 1031s are scary, I get it. And the reason, by the way, I know how scary they are to most of you, is that if you look in MLS, nobody marks the 1031 box, right? And most brokers don't want you to mark the 1031 box because there's a lot of agents that aren't educated about 1031s. And they don't understand what that means, right? And so it kind of, sometimes people don't show that property, they're not as active looking at it, right? So we're gonna talk about some basics first. So, in a nutshell, a 1031 exchange allows your client to sell their investment property. So I'm gonna talk about like a little rental on the corner, right? They're gonna sell that little rental. With an exchange, they're buying real estate or selling real estate and buying real estate. Through the exchange process, they're holding on to all of their equity, right? Not just after tax equity. And that can be really powerful, right? Regardless of where our market is today, here in Clark County, your clients are all sitting on a tremendous amount of equity, right? Compared to a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Investor mindset is very much, how do I hold on to that equity and get it to my next step? How do I continue to put that equity to work for me, right? So we're talking about a transaction that they're selling and buying and replacing full value. So I've said this over and over again. I'm a big fan of 1031s, obviously, because it's the greatest wealth building tool in the IRS code. I know that seems counterintuitive. We're talking about taxes. 1031 is about generational wealth building. This is about how to start something in real estate, build a portfolio, pass it on to your heirs, and your heirs inherit the value of that real estate at today's value, with no tax liability, essentially. So it's really powerful. And I know there's a lot of guys out there on Instagram that talk about 1031s, and they're absolutely correct. It's an incredible tool, right? So when we talk about 1031 exchanges, I hope you guys can see. Sorry, I'm a walker talker. I figure we'll fill the room. So when we talk about taxation with investments, and we're still that little rental on the corner, right? Your client actually has layers of taxation that they're looking at when they sell that property. right? We all know about capital gains tax, right? 15 to 20% on the gain. That 15 to 20% depends on the bracket your clients are in and their filing status, okay? The second one, this is a little bit of a what the heck is depreciation recapture, right? This is usually when I'm having a first consultation with an investor client that maybe hasn't sold real estate yet, and I discuss depreciation recapture, and they go, wait, nobody told me this. Well, it's because it's the IRS, right? So with that little, exactly, we're nice people, them not so much. So when your client has that little rental, and they're filing their taxes every year, and they're checking that box to take the depreciation, which is a credit, right? Most people just check it automatically, most CPAs check it automatically. It's not in parentheses on the form, because again, it's the IRS. What it doesn't say there is, by the way, when you sell this piece of investment property, if you're not reinvesting, we're gonna take back 25% of all of this depreciation that you've taken, in addition to your capital gains tax, right? I know, it's kind of one of those rude awakening things. I talked to a client last year, really nice couple, they've worked their behinds off for quite a while. They have 2 little commercial properties. They've taken $800,000 in depreciation over the years. Who ground? Exactly, exactly.
That's gonna hurt.
It's gonna hurt, yeah, because when you combine that with the capital gains tax and perhaps the net investment income tax, that's also bracket dependent, that can be 30%, right, of your equity going to the government. Your California clients, the exodus from California is real, right? I see all the license plates. I don't know why they can't drive faster, but that's me, I'm sorry, I'm a Vegas driver. Like, come on. So your California clients, when they're selling that little rental on the corner, they have an additional 9.2 to 10.3 state tax on top of this. So your California clients, when they sell those investment properties, if they're not exchanging, so in other words, if they're not replacing that property and participating in that market driver, 40 up to 40% of their equity that they've worked so hard to build over the years goes to the government for taxation, right?
Does that investment have to be made in the United States?
United States, US Virgin Islands and Guam.
Okay.
Yeah, no foreign countries actually, so. But I did have a gentleman buy a beautiful home in the Virgin Islands a few years ago. And he's renting it out for 2 years and he's gonna move into it. And we'll talk about how you can convert the investment. That's a great question, so. So 1031, and I'm sorry, my brain is IRS trained, you guys, and attorney trained. So I use the terminology of the 1031 industry. So I'm just gonna throw these out really quick. We're talking about an exchanger, that's your client. That's your client that's selling and buying real estate, right? We call them the taxpayer or the exchanger in my world. The accommodator, that's us. So the IRS requires your client to have a neutral third party associated in their investment transaction in order to have a 1031 exchange recognized by the government, okay? Their money cannot sit in a title company. They cannot take their money and then reinvest it, okay? It has to be held by an accommodator or a qualified intermediary. There's multiple terms that you'll hear there. The relinquished property, this is the property they're selling. And the replacement property, that's the property they're buying. And they can buy multiple replacements. So, we talk about 1031s. I'm sorry, you guys, I'm a walker talker. I hope that's not messing up the video, now that I think about it. Okay.
I do the same thing.
Oh, do you? Okay, good, thank you. And by the way, don't hesitate if you have some questions, you guys. I have a couple of built-in parts, but I will get them out of you, so. We talk about why clients do a 1031, right? A lot of times the question is, and it's an obvious question, why would I sell one property and buy one property if my value is the same, right? So a lot of reasons there. Maybe I'm upgrading the value. Maybe I'm changing my geographic area. Maybe the age of my rental is maxed out. Maybe it's the HOA costs and the maintenance are just too high. So we do see a lot of one for one. But we also see diversification, right? We're talking about clients that are building wealth through real estate ownership. So if I have one little rental on the corner, and maybe I've held it for a few years and I have maybe 100,000 in equity. I'm just saying that because our market's been so crazy the last couple of years. So maybe I have 100,000 in equity. I'm gonna sell that one property and I'm gonna buy multiple replacement properties, right? The other thing I can do is I can consolidate. So we see a progression from that owning that little rental in the corner to I never want to be a landlord again and deal with a tenant, right? We've all heard that. To, you know, I'm gonna go into commercial property. I'm gonna go into that next level. So they can also sell multiple properties and go into one larger, right? So consolidation. And this works really well with reverses. We talk about reverse, and we're gonna tie it into the time frame. So if you have a client that's selling multiple and they're going into one larger one, a reverse exchange is a good idea to have them look at, just because of the time frames associated. So, when we talk about, so for a 1031 exchange, for your client to have all of that tax liability deferred, right? There's 3 basic requirements that they're gonna need to meet. They're gonna need to buy a property that's equal or greater in value to the property they sold. They need to reinvest all of their cash equity coming out, right? And the third one's a little bit of a brain melter. I apologize, it's early, you guys. It's debt replacement. So if I have that rental in the corner and it's worth $500,000 and I have a mortgage for 2, regardless of that mortgage, the market value of my property is $500,000, right? Maybe I have no mortgage, my property is still worth $500,000, okay? So when we talk about debt, a lot of times your clients are gonna be confused. They're gonna be like, well, I've got $100,000 cash coming to me after my debt is paid off at the close of escrow. I'm reinvesting that. No. You're purchasing property that's the same value as the property you're selling. So if I'm selling for 5, I'm buying for 5 or more, right? When we talk about net value, it's the sales price, yes.
Maybe you'll talk about it, but if you have one client, the house is in solely their name,
Yeah.
but then the house that they're upgrading or downgrading to is going to be in 2 names. Does that matter?
It does matter. We're gonna talk about that, because it's all about the underlying taxpayer. Unless that's a married couple, and they live in a community property state, and they file jointly, right? So then essentially they're the same taxpayer, right? We and the IRS still don't like to see a spouse added. But if we're talking about another individual that I'm not married to, that's a different scenario, and we will definitely talk about that. So I love that question, thank
How
you.
about the opposite, where 2 own and then only one wants to buy? Is that the same?
It depends on the structure of how they own that property. I love it, you guys are 2 slides ahead of me, that's awesome, that means it's kind of clicking, that's wonderful. So give me just a minute, we're gonna talk about vesting. Vesting is really, really important, that continuity, and it comes up surprisingly often in exchanges. So thank you for those questions, I do appreciate it. I just don't wanna jump ahead too much.
Can you go back 1 slide just so I can take a picture of it?
Of course. And I will, by the way, everybody will get, well, I'll send it to Mark, a PDF copy of the presentation, and then the information you have here, I'll send that to you electronically as well. The FAQs are really helpful for your clients. That covers a lot of what we're gonna talk about, right? So thank you. And did you?
Thank you, I got it.
Okay, awesome. I'm glad you can see over there, I wasn't quite sure, so. So we talked about exchanges, so has anybody heard about time frames in exchanges? Yes, I know, that's the pressure part, right? Your clients are on kind of a ticking clock, excuse me. And that clock starts to tick from the close of escrow of the property they're selling, okay? So when I sell my little rental in the corner, the close of escrow, my clock is ticking on my exchange. I have 180 days total to close on all of my replacement properties. The first 45 days is what we call the identification period. Now, first 45 is the critical time. This is when you're putting out all that energy, your client is putting all that energy out to go find that replacement property. Remember, they have a tax bill that's looming. These are very, very motivated clients, right? They're not gonna have you show them 30 houses. They don't care where the bedroom is. These are money people. They're looking at cash flow and they're looking at numbers. So these are wonderful clients, you guys. I want a client that's gonna sell one and buy one always. And I've seen exchanges, and in the last couple of years, we talked about diversification. Last year we had one commercial property, they sold a very large commercial property and bought 50 single-family residential properties here in Las Vegas. I wanted that client too, when I was an agent, right? This is a wonderful part of the market to look at. So 45 days is the identification period. We talk about identifying. We're talking about either getting your client under contract on the property they're gonna purchase within the first 45 days, right? If they're not under contract and they identify a property, essentially they're leaving the door open to be able to purchase that property, okay? But past day 45, they can only purchase something they've identified, okay? That's why that first 45 days is super, super critical, right? And we think 45 days is a lot of time. It goes very, very quickly. Yes, Mark?
Can they identify multiple properties but only purchase one?
Absolutely, absolutely. So there's 3 rules for identifying. So the 3 property rule, great question, thank you so much. So they can identify 3 properties regardless of value. So if I'm selling my rental in the corner, it's $500,000. I could identify $3 million, 3 single, $1 million properties, and that value doesn't matter, right? But if you have a client that wants to identify more than 3, it's called the 200% rule. They cannot exceed 200% of the value. So if I exceed 5 properties and I go over 200%, I'm breaking that rule. And then the IRS says, well, now you have to purchase 95%, which is essentially 100%, right? I'm not sure how they came up with 95%. So, and by the way, these are technical rules. And I don't want you to think that you have to take responsibility for guiding your client through this. This is our job. We're professionals, we specialize in 1031 code. It's important for you to know that those time frames, you've got to get them closed in that 180. You've got to get them either under contract or identified by day 45, right?
How is that identification formalized if you're not in contract?
It's simply a form that they're gonna file with us. And they get that form, so the day that their property closes, the next day they get a letter from us. And it says, here's your 45-day deadline, here's your 180-day deadline, this is how much money we're holding for you, and your identification form is attached. We don't want the form during that 45 days when you're out writing a bunch of contracts, right? Just go write the contracts, get something secured. It's that 45 day is that tipping point, right? If they're not under contract and they're still in it to win it, right? They still wanna move forward is when they're gonna identify. So, any other questions on identification? Awesome. So I think this is the biggest myth in the real estate industry. Who's heard the term like kind? Nobody? Everybody? Okay. So,
Like you're the same, we're in the same family,
well, so like kind, when we talk about exchanges, so when I was an agent and I heard the term like kind, to me that meant single family for single family, right? It's actually real property for real property. This is usually one of the first questions your clients are asking me and they're gonna ask you. I'm selling my rental, I wanna buy land. I wanna buy a combination, I wanna go to a commercial property. Absolutely, as long as they're deeded in to real property. The 30-year lease, that one's usually a surprise, right? So a 30-year commercial lease or a 15-year with a 15-year option is also real property. I know, that one's a good one actually to know, so.
I'm sorry, you said land?
Yeah.
Land is considered real property?
Yes, yes, I know, that's one of the biggest surprises. And your clients that are selling land, so they can sell land, they can go into commercial, single family, you can go back and forth with those property types. It's very important to know. The IRS code says the real estate has to be held for productive use or business, right? If I'm holding my land, it's still productive use. So, I love that question, thank you. That's a really good one. So what is not like kind? I'm sorry guys, this is one of my favorite parts. I'm a simple-brained person. Primary residence, I'm gonna do it again. Just because I like it. So, primary residence, right? So we know, and I get this call every week, you guys. When your clients are selling their primary, we're just talking about investments. We're just talking about that rental world, right? we're talking about a primary. Your clients already have an exemption of gain, right? If they live in their primary home for a minimum of 2 years out of the last 5, when they sell that property, if you're single, you have $250,000 you can put in your pocket tax-free, right? If you're a married couple, it's $500,000. It's an exemption on primary, okay? So, and the reason I have that on here is that I get asked that question a lot. Yes? Sure. So your primary residence, the home that you live in, that you own, you live there for 2 continuous years out of 5 years. When you sell that piece of real estate, you have an exemption of taxation on the gain, okay? If you're single, it's up to $250,000. If you're married, it's up to $500,000, okay? We're gonna talk about combining strategies, but the reason I point this out is a lot of times your clients will call me and 2 minutes into the conversation, like, oh, I'm selling a primary, I wanna buy a primary. Doesn't work for an exchange, okay? There's a process where they can buy a future primary, rent it, and then move into it. We're gonna talk about that. But coming directly in and out is not an exchange, right? It's just investment property. Any questions? You guys are quiet. I'm gonna get these out of you. So flippers don't qualify for 1031 deferral, okay? Your clients that are buying real estate and improving it and not holding it for business, right? That's a flipper. They don't get any deferral. There are some other 401k strategies that flippers use, right? But they're not able to defer taxation on that property. So,
Quick question.
of course.
Is there a time limit you have to hold on to the property to be not considered a flipper?
Gosh, I love that question. It's a complicated answer. So, I know, sorry. So, in the IRS code, unless we're talking about conversions, there's actually nowhere in the code that says exactly how long an investor has to own real estate before it qualifies for an exchange. I know that's a little counterintuitive because we've all heard 2 years, right? The reason we hear 2 years is we want to have 2 years of reported income, right? But that doesn't mean they can't qualify for an exchange with a short period. The IRS looks at 2 things always, intent and use. What was your intent with that piece of real estate, and how did you actually use that piece of real estate? So for example, during the pandemic, we had a lot of property owners here in Las Vegas leave their properties vacant, right? They were hearing the horror stories, people are trashing properties, they're not paying rent, on and on and on. For folks that left their property vacant for more than a 6 to 12 month period, they disqualified that property as an investment, right? It's not rented, and the use, when I have a vacant piece of real estate that I own, the use by the IRS is attributed to me as a second home, okay? I can re-qualify it by renting it, okay? Reestablishing that path, right? But an interesting, and I'm sorry, it's a long answer on that. It's just not a simple answer sometimes with this. But it's important to know, so for example, I had 2 exchanges in the last 2 years where the owner had a 1-month hold period. And it's a valid exchange. And that's because they set the path of intent and use. Buying new construction, I had it advertised for rent. They had accepted an application. And then what happened was they never rented it, they never had any rental income from the property, but they received an unsolicited offer. That's still a valid exchangeable property because the client showed their intent, right? They took the actions, it wasn't an MLS, it's a true unsolicited offer. So there are exceptions sometimes on that, right? It's all circumstantial, and that's why we always wanna have that in-depth conversation with your client. Yes?
What constitutes an investment or rental? Like, there's so many Airbnbs and Verbos and those short-term rentals, do those qualify?
Absolutely.
So if a flipper goes in and, let's say, partially remodels and then rents it through Airbnb just for a weekend or whatever, does that? I mean,
no. It wouldn't just be a weekend like that. That's an obvious strategy to skirt the code, right? And the IRS has seen those tricks before, you guys.
So how long does someone, if someone just strictly wants to do a Airbnb or Vrbo, short-term rental, how long do they have to implement that program for it to be considered a rental?
Well, they're gonna wanna have at least a couple of years of reported income, right? And reported income is really important. I love that question. You can have an investment and have your mom in it, right? But my mom has to pay rent. I know. I'm not gonna tell my mom that. I'm gonna let my property manager tell my mom that. But you can have a vacation rental, you can have a family member in a rental, right? As long as they're paying you rent.
Does it have to be fair market value?
It does need to be fair market value rent, yeah. So, and by the way, the flipper crosses that line from being a flipper to an investor the minute they rent the property, but that doesn't mean that they've set the stage to truly qualify the property, right? I'm gonna go on, so mixed use properties, this is really important concept. We have a lot of homes here in Las Vegas that have a primary and maybe they have a casita out back, right? They have a property that can be allocated, it's a mixed use. Part of it is their primary and part of it is the investment. When we talk about allocating, it's easy in a duplex, right? If I live in half of a duplex and I rent half of it, 50% of the value is my investment, 50% of the value is my primary. It's the same thing with that casita property or with land, oh, she left. Let's say, or with land that might have a primary and a productive crop going, right? So mixed use is an important concept to understand. And we do get a lot of investors that'll buy a fourplex or a duplex and wanna live in part of it, right? I don't know if I wanna live next to an owner that lives in,
So if
it's
you
a
have,
little too close for me, my landlord. Yes.
so if you have a casita in your primary and you actually use it as a rental.
Yeah.
You can, if you sell the house, your primary and the actual casita as one, that's a 1031 exchange.
Well, the casita value is the 1031 exchange. So in that example, let's say, I'm just gonna do rough numbers. Let's say that a quarter of the square footage of the real estate is taken up by the casita and the rental. And if I'm selling that property for $1 million, 250,000, so a quarter of my value can go into an exchange, right? The other 750,000, the other 3/4 is my primary. So I can take my exemption, right? But I can allocate that rental. Now the casita, they have to report the income. And the reason I keep saying that, you guys, I'm always surprised by this. I get a lot of people that call me and go, I've had a rental for a couple of years, I didn't report the income, I wanna do an exchange. I'm like, no. You either pay the big tax, the little tax, or the big tax, or both. You've gotta pay tax somewhere, right? But there's no benefit to your clients to not report their rental income. They've gotta set the stage to get those bigger benefits down the line. It's a great question, thank you. Any other questions before we go on? I'm gonna talk about red flags and then I'm gonna talk about some advanced stuff.
Were you gonna cover vesting?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yes, I am. Vesting is really important, and I know you guys asked me that right
I
in
have a
front.
couple questions on this.
Yeah, I feel it. I got you. And ask away, you guys, pick my brain. I have too much information in here that's useless. So these are things to be aware of. They do not prohibit an exchange, but they add a complexity to an exchange, right?
I got a question.
Of course.
When you report the rental income, don't you depreciate that too?
Yeah, but you don't have to depreciate.
Well, you can depreciate like 1 year or 5 years.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, absolutely. Great question, thank you. No, I love it. So when we talk, and I'm hearing more and more about seller financing right now, right? Those sellers that are wanting to move their real estate, I'm hearing more and more. 2 years ago, it's like seller financing, what are you talking about? Go buy that house quickly. So seller financing. If your client is taking a note, they can still do a 1031 exchange. But there's a couple of maneuvers, but they do have to replace, there's a couple of maneuvers to be able to replace the value. But they have to replace the value of the note, right? We're talking value for value in real estate. So if I'm gonna take a note for $50,000, hopefully I have the cash in my bank to put that $50,000 into the exchange, right? If I do that, there's some benefits there. So if I do that, the principal of my note, as I receive that income, is deferred. My interest only is taxable there. So just know it complicates it, but it doesn't prohibit a 1031 exchange, okay? Exchanging with a related party, on the other hand, that's a big no-no. I'm surprised at how often this comes up. I'm like you, most of us come from very humble means. I was actually the first person in my family to own a piece of real estate. And so when I get a call and they're like, my brother owns real estate, my sister owns real estate, my aunt owns real estate, can we buy and sell each other's properties? No. And the reason they cannot do that is the basis shift between related parties. That's a big no-no with the IRS. Because you're never actually selling on the open market, right? You're only reinvesting and driving with your family member, right? They do not allow that. This is actually such an important issue. On the form that your clients report a 1031 exchange on, it's question number 2. Was anybody in the, are these any related parties? So, partnership and S-corps. This kind of ties into vesting. We're gonna go into vesting a little bit more. But we need to have that continuity, and occasionally you'll have a partnership and maybe one partner doesn't want to move forward with the purchase, right? That complicates it because now we have a disconnect of the taxpayer, okay? So something to be aware of. So FERPTA withholding. We have a lot of foreign investors in this country, right? They get the same benefits of deferring their tax liabilities as everyone else, okay? So if you have a foreign investor, know that they can do an exchange, okay? It's a similar type of process to the seller financing. They're gonna have a withholding of 15% at escrow, right? That 15% withholding, they're gonna need to have the cash to replace it in the purchase, right? In the meantime, they've applied for a withholding certificate with the IRS to waive it. So, I know that's a little complicated, I'm sorry, but it's important to know. So vesting. So let's talk about vesting. So continuity, right? From the selling party to the buying party. But some vesting entities are disregarded. In other words, they don't exist as far as the IRS is concerned, okay? Because it doesn't pay a separate, or file a separate tax return. So if I have an LLC, right? And it's a single member LLC. And we all know attorneys and CPAs love to make up entities, right, for your clients. It's a good buffer of liability with their real estate. That entity that doesn't exist, I can sell in that entity, I can buy in my name, right? It's the same thing with a trust. A trust is a disregarded entity. So I can hold my real estate in my trust, right? My trust doesn't file a separate tax return. That's what I mean by disregarded entity. It's not a tax filing entity versus an S-corp or partnership. So with a trust, for example, this is one of the issues you might run into. Maybe your client has the property they're selling vested in their trust, right? When they go to buy their replacement property, the lender is not going to lend in the name of their trust. Their trust doesn't have assets. Their single member LLC does not have assets. It's not a problem. So they're gonna sell in the name of their trust, they're gonna purchase and deed into their individual names, and then they can turn around and immediately claim deed the property into their trust, okay? Again, it doesn't matter. Those two don't exist, okay? It gets complicated when let's say you and I created an LLC. Right? We've now created a new tax-paying entity because you and I are not married. We don't file our joint taxes, right? So now we're two individual taxpayers that have created a tax-paying entity to hold real estate. We're essentially created a partnership of sorts, right? So that's where those lines are. Did that answer some of your questions?
I was just wondering about the trust. If a property is held in a trust, you know, the trust is not an actual person, so.
Right.
So you could sell it from the trust and then buy it as an individual and then put it into the trust.
Exactly, exactly. A trust becomes a tax-paying entity when the person dies.
Okay, could I even go further? Let's say there's a trust, they own a property, two people were in the trust, there's a successor trustee, one of the trustees dies, does the successor trustee have to be on the new purchase too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So a trust becomes irrevocable when the individual dies. Okay. So that's when it goes from disregarded to being a tax-paying entity, right? It's a great question. It comes up very, very, very often. I probably have this LLC mind-numbing conversation, you guys, I'm so sorry. And trust every single day, multiple times. Very, very, very common. When I own real estate, when you own real estate, most of the time you're gonna have a little entity in there that's gonna be a buffer, right? So this comes up very, very often. The biggest issue with vesting is if you have a partnership, maybe you and I have that partnership, and we're gonna sell our rental on the corner, and you're like, no, I'm out. That creates a problem. You have reported income, now we've gotta drop you out of our partnership as an individual, right? And then I have to hold on to that tax-paying entity that we created, okay?
Does it start a new clock for the 2 years if that partnership is dissolved?
No, it does not. That's a great question. I'm gonna say no. That was my gut, was no. So I'm not gonna second guess myself on that one. But I would call an attorney if it came up. So I should know, I would call one of our attorneys, by the way. And that's, but when we talk about how complicated some of this is, you guys, yes, my company is actually owned by Fidelity National Financial. We're the biggest QI out there. The resources I have, so if somebody asks me a question and I'm not sure that I know the exact right answer, I have 5 attorneys that I'm gonna call all day long. And just know that if you have a client that has a complicated scenario, I'm a free resource. I'm gonna have a consultation with your client and they have a question I can't answer. I have an attorney that I can call for free, okay? We're not gonna take them on as a client, but I have that resource. You know, so don't hesitate with those. Yes.
So you can work with any properties in the United States?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And interestingly, so Nevada, I always think Nevada gets a bad rap, right? Everybody thinks we're like the wild, wild west and things are just crazy. Believe it or not, the 1031 industry is unregulated. I can't believe that myself. I've been doing exchanges since the early 2000s. We hold money. We are an unregulated industry. And so security is really, really important. It's pretty amazing how many, you know, I can find somebody on the internet for half. But Nevada, my point in all that babble, is that Nevada is one of the few states that actually licenses qualified intermediaries. They require a license here. Whereas a lot of states, you can just set up a website and say, I'll take your money. I know. You guys are as stunned as I am, but I will be having a conversation with someone and they'll be like, well, I found somebody on the internet for $400. And in my mind, I'm like, that's your life savings. I don't even trust people on Twitter, for goodness sakes, much less to give them $500,000. So it's really important to understand. I love that you brought that up. Thank you. So I have some built-in questions. I don't want to go too much over. I really do respect your time. Do we have another like 5 minutes and we'll touch on some of the advanced stuff? Okay, is that okay, Mark? Okay, awesome, thank you. So I have some built-in questions because these are common questions that your clients are asking me. So right now we're all having the conversation with people that aren't making decisions, right? I know, it's annoying. Everybody's on the fence, they're not quite sure what to do with their real estate. I'm having the conversation with investors like, I wanna sell, but I'm not sure if I'm gonna find a replacement property. I might go to another state, maybe I'm not crazy about what I find. And the question is, if I start an exchange, when do I get my money back? Right, we talked about identification. If your client's in it to win it, they're gonna identify and move forward through the 180-day period. But maybe your client at day 44 is like, no. I'm not gonna find a property, I don't like where the market is. If they do not identify, so they're not under contract, and they choose to not identify, their money goes back to them on day 46.
They go where?
It goes back to them. That's the earliest they can get their money back. So a lot of clients right now are starting an exchange, they're leaving the door open for 45 days. They're giving themselves that window to go find the replacement property, right? Which I would suggest, because you know how real estate is, you guys? You can say no, and then 2 days later, this wonderful little gem pops up in the market, right? The moment the client receives funds, their taxation is in place. If they start an exchange, they have a 45-day period to think it through, right? So, This is an important one. When can you get your client under contract on the replacement property? As soon as possible, right? So if it's the little rental in the corner, and you got a contract today, I'm gonna say 2 days ago, and you're in escrow, absolutely go into the market. You can write a contingent offer on the purchase, right? These are clients that are coming in either cash rich or cash buyers, which is a tremendous amount of leverage in the market right now, right? We start a lot of exchanges with both contracts in place, right? So you don't need to wait for that close of escrow and that clock to start ticking.
You have to make it contingent.
You do have to make it contingent, sure, yeah. But think about new construction. We have a lot of clients that went under contract on new construction 2 years ago? Year ago? I know. But they're not selling their property yet. They've essentially written a contract on the replacement. And they're gonna wait until they have an estimated completion date, maybe 6 months from now, 9 months from now. And they're gonna go, hey, let's list the house right now. So you're not doing reverse, but you're backing into the purchase, right? So very, very common with new construction. We wanna start the exchange process. So when you go on your listing appointment, it's about the time I wanna talk to your client, right? I wanna talk to them, make sure they qualify, make sure they understand, and so that they have some time to make a decision, right? And then we can actually, is escrow still in the room? Oh, I'm sorry, okay. Can we not hear this? So, what's the latest an exchange can be put in place? You're not gonna like this. It's actually up until the day of recordation, right? Up until that day. We can only counsel clients so much, right? I can talk to someone, every week for a month, and they're on the fence, and then they sit down at the signing and they go, I think I'm gonna do that 1031 thing, right? It's not too late. Call me, we get the contract, we get the title report, they're gonna sign DocuSign. We've done this fire drill many, many, many times, right? Yes?
Is day of recordation the 180 day?
No, so this, we're talking about when they sell the property. But yes, it is. Yes, on the purchase side, yes. And we've had a couple closings on that purchase at day 179 recently on new construction, which nobody needs that kind of stress. But this is on when they're selling, okay? So there's some misinformation out there right now. I've had a lot of calls recently. I love the internet and I love YouTube. I love YouTube, you guys. But I don't go to YouTube for tax advice. And I don't go watch 1031 guys on YouTube. There's a lot of misinformation. I'm getting a lot of calls right now where people go, oh, I thought I had to have my replacement property selected first. No, not the case. Or there's a concept out there that I have to start the exchange when I have a signed offer. No, that's when we want to open an exchange, but it's not required, okay? So we can open an exchange and get one in place right up until the day your clients are closing, okay? Hopefully it's a 2 day before, or at least, yes. Did you have a question? No? Okay. So this is really important, cash and refinancing, right? We all need cash. Even if I have a whole portfolio of real estate and I don't have any cash, I'm gonna have some struggles, right? I get this question a lot. So from the sale of that piece of real estate, if I hold cash back, maybe I'm gonna do a partial exchange. I'm gonna hold back 20,000 cash, okay? I'm gonna be taxed on that 20,000, right? And it's not a problem. But if I'm looking at a larger amount of cash, right? We don't ever wanna see a client do a refinance right before an exchange. It's an obvious red flag that they're trying to get around boot. Boot is what we call when your client's receiving cash at the closing, right? So what we wanna do is have them complete an exchange, and then 4 to 6 months down the line, then do a cash out refi, because all they've done is add debt to their real estate, right? So, swap and two drop, I'm sorry you guys, I'm simple brain. Yes, Mark?
What if they do a cash out refi and then 6 months later decide they want to sell?
Still kind of close, that's still kind of close. I would have them talk to their tax advisor, yeah, if they've done that. Because when I say defer to their tax advisor, sometimes when someone's pushed the limits, I'm always gonna say, let's get your tax advisor involved, because ultimately they're gonna have your back, right? And if they say they've got your back, we're gonna facilitate for you. I love that, thank you. So we talk about what the value is of exchanges. I'm not gonna go too much over you guys. I think we'll wrap it up pretty quickly, but this is really the key here. This is a super important concept to understand. So, what's that old saying, death and taxes are inevitable? Taxes are actually not inevitable, right? There are strategies to pass on real estate, right? And when we talk about 1031, this is the real value, okay? So if my rental in the corner, maybe I purchased it for 200,000 and it's worth 500,000. If I sell it today, I'm taxed on 300,000. If I deeded that property to my son, you now have that tax liability on $300,000. And by the way, I have this conversation every single day. People don't understand that you cannot just gift real estate to your relatives. You are also gifting your tax liability, which isn't very nice, right? The other side of that, what I do, instead of giving you my property right now, I'm in it for the long haul. Okay, I'm gonna hold on to my real estate. I'm gonna create that path of wealth. Eventually, when I pass, you inherit that real estate, and now your basis, so my basis was 200,000, your basis is the value that you inherited it at when you get that property appraised. So your basis is now 500,000. So you can sell that property and have no tax, essentially, right? If it's a month later, there's probably no gain in that month. That's generational wealth building 101, right? I get a lot of questions. I'm actually dealing with someone right now who, it's dad and his daughter and her husband live in the rental property. They've been paying dad rent. They're setting that path, but now the daughter wants the dad to deed the property over to her. And I'm trying to explain to them, sure, you can do that, but your daughter now has a tax bill. Your daughter now inherited that gain. I shouldn't say inherited, but you gave her your gain. You gave her your profit. You gave her your tax bill, right?
Or a trust and give it to her as a beneficiary.
Exactly. Swap until you drop. I know that sounds ridiculous. I have a client right now, you guys, she's 94 years old. I'm doing a deal with her this week. She's selling a $10 million piece of real estate. She's reinvesting because she understands holding on to equity for her family, right? What she's building for her family and how to pass it on. Yes, I know you have a question. I wanted to get through that. I was hoping maybe I answered
What
part
if
of
I
it.
change my mind to do
Oh,
the
oh.
1031? How soon can they release my money, the proceeds of the sale of my property?
Well, you mean if they don't identify, if they don't do an exchange?
Yeah, in the middle, the 1031, and I suddenly want to buy.
Well, not in the middle. So if they start an exchange and we hold their funds, the very earliest, if they don't identify, the earliest they can get their money back is day 46. Okay, that's a failed exchange. Okay, yes.
Just a quick question, when you say you need to show 2 years of reportable income, is that 2 calendar years or time-wise that equals 2 years?
It's 2 calendar reporting years.
Because,
It's 2 reporting years.
So it doesn't matter if it's a partial rental, correct? It doesn't have to be consecutive 2 years? Like, let's say someone only does vacation rentals on this property. They do winter rentals only. Does that apply for the 2 years?
That's a great question. It's a complicated answer. So it depends on how much they use the property. So if they rent the property for 6 months and they live in it for 6 months, that's not an investment
What
property.
if 6 months is a vacation home for friends and family and 6 months is a winter rental?
No. Not unless the family and friends are renting it and they're not family and friends, they're tenants, right? But it can be, so I'm gonna go back, let's go back one second on that. So if I have a piece of real estate and I rent it for 6 months out of the year and I use it for 6 months out of the year, it's my second home.
Okay.
It's not an investment property.
What if you don't use it for that six months?
Sure, then it's just an investment property. But we don't designate renting to other individuals versus renting to my family member. If I'm letting my family member use it, it's not an investment. It's not
So
qualified.
the 2 years, what I'm getting at, the 2 years doesn't have to be cumulative of 2 years of actual rental, it's the calendar years.
It's the calendar years and it's that continuity of the rental, right? And it's a really important concept when we talk about vacation rentals, okay? For your client to have a valid vacation rental that's exchangeable or that they can exchange into, they can only use it for 10% of the time they have it rented. So if they rent it for 300 days a year, they can use it up to 30 days a year, right? If they use it for 3 months a year, it's now a second home to them, regardless of the income being produced. because they've broken that IRS rule. That's a very specific rule. I love the questions, but we don't designate between who's renting the property.
Yeah, I was just thinking time-wise, if it was cumulative of the actual time the house is being rented, let's say 6 months, or is it 2 years of reportable?
It's the cumulative time over the year. And that's where that 10% rule comes in, right? So if I'm renting it for 300 days that year, and I'm using it for 10%, it's that calendar year.
Okay.
It's a great question, yes.
How would they know how often you use it?
I wait for the fraud question during every single workshop. I can't believe it took you guys this long to ask me about tax fraud. Come on, you guys, everybody always asks me, how do we get around this? So my number one rule is don't lie to the IRS. And your client's number one rule should be don't lie to the IRS. They can solve a murder using your phone. They will find you. They know where you buy groceries. The IRS now, they will actually request all of your digital records. They will discover where you had your Amazon package delivered.
Wow.
Where you got your mail. We don't live in a world of anonymity anymore.
Commission
They
through
will,
Zelle.
they will find you. And you know, and by the way, there are many, I don't wanna scare you guys.
Made it simple.
Yeah, exactly. There are agents in orange jumpsuits. There are a lot of individuals. Al Capone went to jail for tax fraud, not for murder. And the enforcement division of the IRS, they are not to be toyed with. They actually call themselves accountants with guns. That's what they call themselves. I don't wanna mess with an accountant with a gun.
Yeah, well,
I don't
how
wanna
would
mess
you do
with.
that?
Exactly, so I love the question, and I get asked that by your client too, how are they gonna know? Well, God forbid if they got audited, they're gonna request all of your records and they're gonna know. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that a lot of clients don't break that rule all the time, right? And exceed the use. I
They're
don't
looking for
recommend it.
loopholes and how to get away, but,
We
you
don't
know,
wanna look-
IRS is already looking into that.
Yeah, exactly.
Before you even think about it.
Exactly, yes.
Does the rental property have to be managed through a property management company, or can it be self-managed?
That's a great question. No, it can be self-managed. The IRS doesn't require any type of management or layering there or verification. So we don't do reporting to the IRS. Most exchange companies don't, right? People assume when they're like, you're gonna tell them I did an exchange. No, it's the honor system in this country, honor system, right? So yeah, it's kind of how that ties together. Yes?
So I have a buyer coming out of state this weekend, actually,
Okay,
to
great.
31 Exchange, and they sold a duplex.
Yeah.
But they've got another one they're selling, and they asked me if, when they sell that, if they take out a partial loan on this one, and they use those proceeds to pay off a 1031, is that allowed?
I think they might be confused about the process. So, if they're talking about, so if they've sold one,
They've
have they
sold
already
one.
sold it?
Yep, they've sold
And they
one.
already have their money sitting with the third party?
Yes.
With a QI, right? So they already have that ticking clock, they already have their timelines, right? I don't understand how they're trying to tie in the second property.
Well, I'm
Are
gonna
they
hear
talking
more
about
details, this is just a question
Yeah,
they
no,
asked
of
me.
course. Are they
But
talking about selling that second
the
property?
the other one's on the market, it's
Okay.
not, it hasn't sold yet, but.
So they wanna combine them maybe into one purchase?
Yeah, but they have to identify property within 45 days.
Right, so there's two ways they can, there's two ways they can do that. There's two ways they can do that. And consolidation gets a little tricky if the closings aren't at around the same time, right? So it all takes a little planning. So if I have two properties that I'm selling, I'm probably gonna put them on the market at the same time, and I'm going to negotiate my closing dates so that they're fairly close to each other if I'm gonna put both of those into the same exchange.
So we would have to delay escrow with that one sold, because it's not even sold yet.
No, so hold on, so there's two ways. It's okay, remember there's two ways. So way number one is that they're both on the market at the same time, I'm negotiating those closing dates, and I'm gonna put them both into the same exchange, right? The other way to do it is they already have one exchange for the property they sold, right? That money is already sitting there, they already have a timeline, right? They can start a second exchange with the sale of that second property, okay? That second, so they have two exchanges, they're selling two properties, right? They can identify the same property in both exchanges. okay? As long as they're able to close on that property within 180 days.
Okay, cause they were saying something once they took a loan. Okay, so then the other question is, so, cause I've never did a 1031, so closing cost fees in that, what additional fees? I mean, I know they have, whenever they have their money in their QI and they have their fees they pay there, but on purchasing a property, what additional fees do they have?
Well, there's no, so most, so I don't wanna speak for another company, most exchange companies are gonna have a flat fee. So they're gonna be selling a property and buying a property for the same flat fee, right? They only use one exchange company, you're selling and buying, you only use one exchange company. I think they might be a little confused about what that process looks like though. It sounds like what they were trying to do is take cash equity, do some kind of a refi of the second property, pull that cash in to replace their debt with that cash, is what it sounds like.
Well, what they said, like I said, they're gonna be here Sunday, but
Sure.
if they have to take a loan, qualify for a loan, yeah, on the first
Yep.
property,
Purchase.
first purchase, close on that, and if they sell this other one, can they pay off that loan with the proceeds?
Not through an exchange process, they could,
But not
sure.
really, otherwise they're gonna be
Yeah,
taxed.
they could do that, thank you for explaining a little bit more. They could do that. They can make that purchase, they're not gonna do an exchange, so they're gonna have all their tax liability on that second sale, which wouldn't benefit them, right? It wouldn't benefit them to sell a second property just to pay off debt on one property because you're undermining the deferral that you did on the first property, right? So if they're looking at buying a bigger property, they would do a second exchange to incorporate the second purchase. They could do what they're asking you, but it wouldn't make any sense. Sometimes people learn just enough to give me a hold my beer moment, right? And some clients, and I'm not saying that in a disparaging way, right? Clients are lay people, they're not realtors, right? They don't understand the layers and the depth that we go through to educate ourselves and understand how all these things affect them. So I think I'm gonna give you my card and we're gonna for sure.
Yeah, 'cause I want some information
Yeah,
for her, because I
for
don't
sure.
wanna give her information.
Okay, awesome. I'm sorry, guys, we went way over.
That's okay.
You know, so thank you so much, sorry. I was gonna send it to Mark. Yeah, Mark will send it out.
I need to put my name on it.
I wanna know
It's gonna go to
everything, but everyone that's like, here you go, but I don't wanna